Hello. I'm Kristy Ottinger, and I'm having a show here at the McKinney Center until May the 5th. I'm from Tipton, Indiana originally, but I've lived in Tennessee most of my life, and I consider Greenville, Tennessee my home. I went to college down here and loved it, so I decided to stay. Well, I started out in painting and sculpture, but as soon as I graduated from ETSU with the Master in Fine Arts, I decided I wanted to go back to fiber, which is my first love. So I'm a fiber artist exclusively now. My family didn't quilt, but my mom was a wonderful seamstress, and so I learned how to sew from her, and then I went ahead and learned how to quilt later on. With quilters, Faith Ringgold, who is a painter as well, and Terry Hancock Mangat, who is an art quilter as well. Primarily quilting, Faith paints on her quilts, and Terry does too sometimes. They make art quilts that are off the wall, off the chart. Verses in the Bible, I look at titles, I even look at color combinations. I saw a boy walking down the street at ETSU one time, had a beautiful turquoise and cobalt blue jacket, and I thought, oh, I've got to make a quilt with those colors. I have a series here that is from the High Cross, the stone High Cross in County Kildare, Ireland. And the images are 1,000 years old, but they look very contemporary. And I used my colors. I love pattern and texture and humor. And so I put all that together in the very old images. Well, it is fiber, so it's fiber art. But to be a quilt, you have to have 3 layers of fabric, and the top, and then a batting of some sort, and the backing. Now, you get a lot of latitude with what you can use for materials. These days, people make some things out of plastic and tea bags and just whatever. I use a lot of embellishment on my work. I like to find little things, found objects, and put them in my quilt, and then people find out that I do this, and so they bring me a box of goodies, and then I get to play again. Well, this one is fauve in front of her quilt, and I love it because of the color, and I used a lot of 3D embellishments on this one. You can see that there are flowers that stand out from the edge of the quilt, and here's a little purse, and the flap opens up to show a hanky and a little message. I hide messages in my quilts, in the quilting and in, well, here this one says, don't hold back. There are other little hidden messages in the quilt, and it's fun for the viewer to engage, and I feel like that's part of the creative process, is when they receive something that maybe they didn't realize at first. So I like the 12 apostles. Each one of them is different from the other, and there's one that's a little bald-headed man. I put some beads on buttons, and I don't know what else, but I like the colors. I like the play against each other. I did a painting that was very similar to that out of wood, on wood. And so when I got a chance to do the quilt, I played with the fabrics. I machine piece and hand piece. I machine quilt and hand quilt, and also applique. This quilt over here is all hand pieced. It's my COVID quilt, and I would make a square, a block, every evening or every 2 or 3 evenings. And then I had it machine quilted rather than hand quilted. I knew I would never get it finished if I tried to hand quilt it. So it's machine quilted, but it is hand pieced. And a lot of them have both on the quilt. When I was little, I learned to sew when I was about 9 years old. And I was in 4-H, and I made a little apron. And then I put it away. I sewed garments, but I didn't really quilt until I came to Tennessee, I guess, and I made a baby quilt for our son, who's now 40, so that was a long time ago. And when I got a scholarship to the Burren College of Art in Ballyvaughan, Ireland, and there was a lady down the road who was a quilter. I went for painting, but she had bits of silk, and I thought, oh, this is so beautiful. I tried to make something of it. So that was really when I started to do art quilts. And I just found out last night that I'm going to have an artist in residency this summer in Ballyvaughan at the college. Even the religious ones have a little, like the lion, he has sunglasses, but he was one of the lions from the Ishtar Gate in Babylon, ancient Babylon. There was a gate to ancient Babylon that was quite beautiful and had glazed tiles, and they had lions on them. And they're in Berlin now. This is basically what they look like without the sunglasses. Started out making one for the Meadowview Convention Center in Kingsport, Tennessee, and it was 8 feet by 12 feet. So I started out big to start with, and then I have gotten smaller and smaller. It's easier to do, and it's not so strenuous when you're quilting it. But my dream project, I guess, would be to do some sort of a quilt, a banner, for a church or a college. I guess you'd say medium-sized projects, maybe 3 feet by 4 feet. That's my favorite, but even that gets difficult to quilt. I only use a domestic sewing machine. I don't use a long arm. The weight of the fabric is difficult to manage. The colors just sort of come to me. Sometimes I see the quilt finished, and that's great. I'll draw a little thumbnail sketch, and then I'll make a big quilt from that little tiny sketch. But the colors just come. I go into a quilt store and just start pulling fabric, and go into my stash and start pulling fabric to see what will come. And I like pattern against pattern. If the color is right, then the pattern will work with each other. The patterns will work with each other. Started out painting and doing sculptures, and the color studies, the basic color studies work whether it's fiber or whether it's paint on canvas. And so that part just came to me because I understood about how colors work with each other. I like the free hanging of the quilts. I think that's part of the quilts. People just beg to touch them, and of course you're not allowed to, but if it's a good quilt, it will beg you to touch it. I like for my quilts to go off the edge, whatever the concept is. Like this one, her feet hang down, and the edge of her skirt is the edge of the quilt. I do that quite a lot. Anything to make it more accessible to the viewer. This little quilt that's in the corner here with the Tree of Life. I'm having a show up in Roanoke now of just trees of life. So this is the only one that I have in the area. It's going to be in a class in the fall here at the McKinney Center. It's a 3D quilt. The leaves stand out from the back. They're more natural colors. I have done leaves that are bright colors and patterns, but this one is very calm. And then I had to put some gold beads on it just because. I like the glitz. And it's a story quilt. I like to do story quilts. Almost every one of them has a story of some description. Even the one behind me is a made-up story. It's Fauve in front of her quilt. Fauve means the wild beast, and in art history language. And she has won a prize for her quilt, and she's very happy, and she's waving at her friends. The gloves come from my husband's family. The handkerchief in the purse comes from my family. Part of the fabric came from a dress that I had, and just chop them up and sew them back together again. I've done remembrance quilts as well from people who have passed away, and taken their clothing and made memory quilts for people or for myself as well. I would love for you all to come and visit and see the show for real. It's up until May 5th here at the McKinney Center.